Welcome back to Let's Talk Race in Maryland. I'm your host, Harrison Paul. Guys, Donald Trump was on the Flagrant podcast, which is the Schmules or Shules, that racist guy who was with Shits and Giggles. Sorry, excuse me for the language, but that's the name of the podcast. So all that drama. I've never actually really wanted to watch this podcast by that event that took place with those British lads. And and listen, I kind of now get a feel for who he is. I think already in the past there was already some, what should I say, controversy around him regarding his, just who he is, and in terms of being a racist. And it came up again with the lads, Fuhad and James. So it's no surprise to me that he had Donald Trump on his show. But there's a nice little, a piece here from one of his clips, extract from one of his clips that we can discuss today, that I actually wanted to get into a very deep conversation. So if you are a black brother, an African sister, if you could please give me your attention for a few minutes, I would love to break something down to you. I had this conversation quite recently with a Zimbabwean brother. Actually, I was at an event quite recently. I was in Brussels with Diaspora Vote, and we were there with other like-minded people, took some workshops. It was a really good event. And I was speaking to a Zimbabwean brother, and I was like, this is the only time in my life I've ever heard or spoken to an African who has this understanding. So you can imagine this was a big one. Who had this level of depth of thinking when it came to this situation. And I was so impressed by this brother. His name is Tatenda. So shout out to him if he's watching this right now. But I was so impressed by his ability to understand this. And truly, anybody who has an understanding of this theory understands the true meaning of decolonizing. How layered colonization is, how layered decolonizing the mind, how much work and effort it takes. And one of the quotes that he said that weekend, actually, when we spoke, he was like, this is something that they did over periods of time. They were doing this for a long time, the people who colonized, the people who came and left us with these beliefs about ourselves, with these beliefs about what is right and what is wrong, and just this indoctrination. It happened over years, generations. What makes you think ours is supposed to come out overnight? It's one of my favorite things that I've always thought about, and I took into consideration. I just couldn't believe a brother was across from me having this conversation. What made you think that we were going to come out of this overnight when it took hundreds of years to implement? So this is the angle I want to get at today. It's very juicy, so just let's get into the video for now. So basically what I got a clip here is Donald Trump is talking about, reveals his toughest negotiators in the world. So people who, other world leaders who he negotiates with, and he's just, showing the guys here and telling the guys a bit of story time about who is the toughest in the ring when it comes to negotiating. So I want us to actually really focus on this. So let me play this for you and check it out.
We were sending them practically nothing. It was like a one-way, everything was one-way. And by the way, virtually China was the worst, but there were many countries almost as bad. The European Union was almost as bad, in my opinion. It sounds nice. Oh, the European Union is so nice. They were ruthless in their trading. And I said to Angela Merkel, how many Chevrolets do we have in the middle of Berlin? Why? I don't believe any. I said, you're right. And yet we take in all of that. We take in Mercedes-Benz and BMW, and we take in all of this Volkswagen. We're taking in all of these millions and millions of cars. I say, how many American cars are in the middle of Munich or Berlin? And the answer is none. And I had things change around. So, you could say, I think that the answer would be, at this moment, Iran. And I think they could catch him. And if we had a real president, which we don't have a real president. We have a man that is grossly inept. And it's very dangerous because these guys are all at the top of their game. When you talk about President Xi and you talk about any one of the leaders in the world, Macron, He's a smart guy. He's all for France. I mean, he would he
Yeah.
would take the shirt off your back
Oh,
if you didn't know
interesting.
what you were doing.
So when you're with these guys, are these guys all sharks?
Yeah.
And you can sense the energy immediately?
Yeah, not all of them, but some of them aren't sharks in terms.
How are you assessing personality
Okay,
when you
well,
meet them?
I can tell you, like,
So I'm not going to get into that, but you can see the context of the conversation, right? And he then goes to talk about, I'm not sure which leader he speaks about, but I just thought that part for me was the most powerful. You're in the ring with, I think the quote he actually said specifically was, these are people on top of their game. And if you're not on top of your game, they will, like he said, President Macron will take the shirt off your back. Oh, Lord, help me with this today. So the more I study the concept of decolonizing the mind and the more I study these things, a lot of things make sense to me. Even the more I understand the concept of, not the concept, I understand neocolonialism. And then I understand the idea that black people think that Africa is in the state that it is today because you have a bunch of greedy leaders. But then some of us simultaneously believe in neocolonialism, simultaneously believe that, oh yeah, our oil has still never belonged to us. And it makes me wonder of, like, as someone who studies this, you cannot believe the two thing. Okay, maybe some will say we gained independence and then our leaders gave back the independence on, systematically, which actually it can't, that can't be the way it gone. Because if you look at it truly and honestly, everything we've ever had has never truly belonged to us. And if you did the studying, if you actually went to look at the contract, if you actually went to look at independence for real, you understand that even people like Kwame Nkrumah had documented this in his book about neocolonialism, the final stage of imperialism. Yet, Africans are walking around with one of our greatest revolutionaries wrote this down for us to see. Now, the part that I'm having trouble here grasping, and I'm going to pass this to you, and I've had this for a while. I can walk, listen, I think you guys have guessed by now, I'm always telling stories about a gym. I'm a huge gym goer, right? And we won't even talk about gym. We'll talk about men in general. I'm telling you as a man, right? It is very hard to get on with men. I'm going to keep 100 with you on the show today. Because men have something we call ego. Every single man, a lot of the time, are sizing each other up. We size each other up so much that a lot of us sometimes can't even indulge in much friendships. I'm telling you that from a man's circle. Me and my brother always talk about this, how, like, there's certain movements you don't do with a man because you are telling that man, I want to fight. You don't get up in a man's face and talk in his face because you are telling a man, I want to punch you. We're going to fight. So there's so much code rules about respecting a man's space, about not getting on a man because there's so much fragility around our egos. Some of it is, of course, God-given, just to have that, that ability to kind of have self-dignity and self-respect, and it's a male trait, right? And then some of it obviously crosses over into toxic masculinity. But some of it is necessary. That's what makes us pick ourselves up when we fall off the floor. That's what makes us put clothes in our body. That's what makes us, it's a level of self-respect, self-dignity, right? Now, when I think about the tale about African leaders being so corrupt, I think about the fact that what is it that an African leader, please, if you're watching this, African watching this, please tell me, I'm going off the story that you guys say, has absolutely no desire to get in a room with Donald and want to be the superior one in that interaction. Man, if you're watching this, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. How is it that an African leader steps into a room with Macron, with Trump, with the people who are exploiting us, and has absolutely no desire to go one up over them? He just talked about this, saying, if you're not top of your game, they will take the clothes off your back. Meaning it's sharks. These young men are trying to, they're thinking about, obviously this is like Wall Street, but they're thinking this is a bigger Wall Street. This is world leaders. It's not Wall Street. We get the idea that we watch Wolf of Wall Street, that people who are in these places are just go-getters. What is it that, like a beautiful harmony that sings right across Africa? Nobody has that desire. I'm going off what the statements that you say. Nobody has no desire to win. Whatever winning means in that room, win. Now you will say, because they line their own pockets. Because they line their own pockets. For me, that's so stupid. I'll tell you why. I have $1 billion worth of oil. A man walks into a room saying, I'll give you 500 for it. Or rather, better yet, I know I have the resources everybody needs. If I get my house in order and get my business straight, I can actually make more money. Let's say it's 2 billion. Than the 5 billion this man is offering me right now. How does that add up, brothers and sisters? The reason you are so okay with having the belief that we are that rubbish is because you've been handed a belief about yourself that you accept because it goes with the narrative that's always been said about you as a black person, that inherently you are more corrupt. Inherently you are more stupid. So when you look at the destruction across Africa, you feel okay. You are okay with just writing off as an answer as we have a greedy leader who rather is 500 million rather than 2 billion. And this is obviously in the trillions now.
First, France said, you see, you monkeys, you don't know how to manage your money. We're going to demand that you deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the French Minister of Finance. Under the French Central Bank, under the control of the French Minister of Finance. France is then going to take your 85% bank deposits from each and every one of you. Deposit those funds in the French stock market under the French name. And you may or may not know the returns. Today, as we speak, the latest figures are saying for every 14 billion that France invests in the stock market from Africa, they are realizing upwards of 300 billion in return. Every year in, year out, because of these deposits from the African countries, France is taking out of Africa over $500 billion. Now figure it out. For every 14 billion, the returns on the investment are over 300 billion, and they are taking over 500 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in and year out from us poor people, Africans.
Think about that, my brothers and sisters. Think how silly that is. Now, follow me as I'm going. Are you telling me that nobody in this room, no Nigerian leader, no South African, no Zimbabwe, none of them go in and think to themselves when they go to bed, you know what? I want Trump to fear me. The same way Trump goes to his bed and saying, he has said it, I want the whole world to fear me. It's a normal male trait to some extent. Of course, there's some narcissism there, an egomaniac that goes and spills it over, but it's a norm. I want them to respect me. Are you telling me in an African leader, there's absolutely no desire in his bones that runs through? He's just always so okay with taking his 5 billion, his 500 million. That, to me, brothers and sisters, it never added up. And I'm so happy that the more I did my investigation and my digging, I realized that it cannot make sense. And I'm going to give you 2 reasons as to why it is possible for this corruption and exploitation to happen. Hear me out. I was fortunate enough to speak to Vanessa Kabuta, who works in the EU for, racial policies against racism. And it was a very educating workshop, and we were having a wonderful back and forth. And at one point I asked her, I said, what do you think? I was a little bit off topic, but I said, we were just talking about policy and how to, push to get policy in. And we were talking about the action plan against the anti-racism action plan for 2025. We were just discussing all these things. I said, look, aside of that for a second, I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts on, and now this woman works in the EU, bear in mind, right? What are your thoughts, it's an African lady, by the way, to clarify. What are your thoughts on the whole concept around African leaders are just so corrupt and that we are just born innately corrupt, and because the state Africa's in is because we just are not able to rehabilitate ourselves because corruption is just always at the top of our minds and we're just a corrupt people. What's your thoughts on that? And guys, I fought with a lot of Africans for a long while. But this validated me in such a way where I say I'm never going to let another African who I fight about this topic make me lose sleep. She smiled at me. She said, it's a lot more nuanced than that. And I said, oh, God, I needed that. It is a lot more nuanced than that. It is a lot more nuanced than that. And that's what they would want you to believe. They would want you to believe it is as simple as an African leader being corrupt. It is a lot more nuanced than that. And she went on a little bit, but that was, at that point, I was just like, it was a moment I will never forget for my whole life. Just obviously someone who works a little bit on the inside, who probably is asking himself this question, said, it's more nuanced than that. And this is the point I'm trying to say. Now, I will validate some of those Africans today that say our leaders are corrupt and they just love 500 million instead of having 2 billion. They just somehow, for some reason, enjoy 500 million when they know that they could sell and have power over everybody because everybody legitimately leans on their minerals. The whole Western world depends on African minerals. They will be lost without the mineral. There's now a scramble for Africa when it comes to the Asians and everything. And this amount of worth that comes to Africans, we have comfortability. Men, normal men, giving it away. Come on, brothers, come on. Surely, even if money was not involved, men even have this, even when we're playing FIFA, playing Xbox, video games, a brother doesn't even want to let you be him. Even video games. We have pride, self-dignity of, I want to show that my playing skills. Even playing football on the streets, niggas got, I say niggas. Reminds me of that meme. Niggas. Even playing on the street, brothers will get into some beef with each other. Why? Because you're competitive. That seems to be nowhere to be seen when it comes to every African leader. All in sync, that type of mentality. I am not buying it, brothers and sisters. I'm so happy I'm not buying it. Nor is Kwame Nkrumah. I'm not buying it. So check this out. Number one, right? When you have held Africa down and when you've tied Africa down, the way the world organizations tied Africa down, and I'll give you an example. Right now, Africa have been looking to get its artifacts back that were taken during colonization all these times. Did you know that it's been officially said, I watched an interview on it that said, it was a British guy who was speaking, says, we can't give them back because it's against the law.
So you heard that. You heard the argument. It couldn't have been clearer, could it? I mean,
It's very clear.
It's
I'm afraid it is complete nonsense.
Why is it complete nonsense?
It's complete nonsense for this reason. These artifacts were taken in the course of the Third Ashanti War in 1874. They were taken as a result of a war in which the Ashanti Empire had initially invaded a neighboring British colony. Under the law as it stood at the time, under international law as it stood at the time, spoil of war was a perfectly legitimate process. For centuries before that, right back to classical times, the right to take the property of a defeated enemy was regarded as one of the basic principles of international warfare. Now, that remained the case until in 1899, the Hague Convention, an international treaty governing the practice of war, changed the rules and made it contrary to international law to take enemy property regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
So the suggestion that these items were stolen is complete nonsense, with great respect to the lady's passion, which I quite understand, but it's not true.
It is actually, that's you don't understand. You don't understand, imperialist. He stole from you and was smart enough to go set a world organization, create a world organization amongst him and his friends that will then create laws that will discriminate you. That will then create laws that will discriminate you. And then when this person tries to do it by fire or by force, he turns his own people, using his media, will turn his own people against the African leader and demonize him. And then we call that man Robert Mugabe. So now Robert Mugabe is trying to fight off Africans who are trying to kill him when he is trying to show a level of what Trump is saying here, ruthlessness when dealing with the Western world. And he's fighting both them and he's fighting his own people. Why is that? Because the African is still colonized. And this colonization, this colonized mind runs so deeply. So think about this. When you're actually tied down by systems, brothers and sisters, that are there very strategically to keep you tied down by trade rules, interest rates. We have the World Organization, we have the World Bank, we have all these, the EU, we have all these things that have now systematically transferred their oppression, imperialism, into something that is hidden. So you're trying to get the worth for your oil. You're trying to get the worth, it's already been finished. And if you operate outside of that and try to play hero, well, guess what? You're sanctioned. Your people are already suffering. How are you going to let them know, hang in there for a minute while the whole world turns against us? We're going to suffer a little bit more. And you African people are going to believe him? When do you ever believe a black man when he says something? When do you ever believe a black man when he says something? Especially if things are looking like they're going wrong. You tell me you will believe him and hang in there when he's trying to show dominance against the Western world? So the African leader is caught in this conundrum. You hear me? And then on top of being caught in this conundrum, and he's already tied down systematically, guys, I'll do another episode. I have episodes where I've gone into this extensively and I've broke down, I've given evidence, I've given pieces of evidence, loads of stuff like that. It is there. Neocolonialism is a real thing. It's a thing that has shown that, I will put up on the screen here. For an example, there was a contract that was signed at independence. The contract was called the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization.
14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document. You thought they could have found a better name for the document. The document was called the Pact for the Continuation. I repeat, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We are talking about giving you independence, but sign this pact for the continuation of colonization in a different format. And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be independent. Hello. Maybe we need to redefine the meaning of independence for the French.
in the midst of being given independence, the contract was actually called the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. Do you know some African leaders were forced to sign contracts for independence in a language they did not even speak? They did not even speak the language that they were forced to sign the contract in. What do you think that contract said? What do you think that contract said? You think that these Western went through the, efforts and the lengths of killing people like Patrice Lumumba, and then would allow, after all their efforts, someone to enter who didn't cooperate with them? Are you missing the fact that they actually would insert people from the IMF in the treasury of countries like Congo? And you think these people, whilst they were in the treasury, they were not creating a system that said, listen, we're not going to stick around here for a long time. How do we create a system that benefits us even when we are absent? No, but that's too much thinking for the African. It's just easier for me to believe the black man's corrupt. Let me just rest there. It's easy for me to believe that. Why? Because I've always internalized that. That's what always been believed about me. I've internalized it, and it seems like an answer that makes a whole lot of sense. So when all these complications are happening, on top of these complications, here is where I agree with the African to some degree. I always repeat this, it was in my mother's book. We forget, and this is what the conversation I was having with the Zimbabwean brother Tatenda, we forget that African leaders were also colonized. They also have to go through the process of believing, and rather undoing and unlearning the things and belief systems that they have. I can grab 100 or endless amount of Africans today who don't know it when you say it and you put it on a platter for them like this, but they believe what is white is right and what is black is wrong. It's better for me to westernize myself because the West, I had a loved one, I always said on the show, I had a loved one tell me, I believe the black man is stupid, that he was created second and the white man was created first. I have a loved one look me in the eye or rather said it to me over the phone with so much conviction and belief. And I can tell you, that's not the only one that said that to me. That's not the only one who said that to me. I know that's a belief of, listen, we love ourselves, nothing else we can do, but we all know the white man does it best. And of course, the only brother who I was talking to who had this mindset was an archaeologist. And his studies and his passion is learning how to decolonize science. One of them is science. How everything you hear that is invented, it's invented from a Westerner. And they don't document what we invent. So we look like we don't invent anything. A creative country like a continent like Africa, we look like we don't invent anything. And he was explaining to me a story of a painter and now this it's obviously not invention, but a painter who had been painting something, and a style of painting, it's an old lady, a style of painting had been passed down in her family line for generations, or even her tribe for generations, a South African woman. And recently, they discovered her and they recognized her and they gave her a PhD without actually having to go through it. And what he's arguing is saying, why is it that despite her gift and her talent, only the moment she was handed the paper that said PhD by the Westerners, then was she valid? Why is it that everything in this world has to be validated by the Western world before it can be considered valid? So this is the type of conversation I'm having with this guy who's understanding the depths of colonialism, that nothing white is right. That's always the pinnacle of human existence. And if you want to go to the top, you must cross through the white man and ask him for his permission if he sees this as an eligible thing. Where does that way of thinking come from? So I can have a real conversation with a brother where we can unpack these things and then understand, and then that's a brother who can have empathy and understand what it takes to decolonize people. It's not an overnight thing. It's an indoctrination. Oh, my goodness. My goodness, my goodness, my goodness. So he's talking about African leaders who partially don't even realize that they are in the fear of the white man. Their back is against the wall, and they maybe do overtrust the imperialist or the European Union leader who's shaking their hand or the British leader who's shaking their hand. There is a fear, like we have, that if I don't have association with this white man, I may get cut off from life. My advancement as a human species comes from my connection with this white man. Without it, can I really succeed? Oh, I really hope you catch it what I'm putting down today. I really hope you guys are picking up what I'm putting down today. I see this in everyday Africans. Of course, it's in African leaders to some degree. So there's two hurdles he's facing. The actual maze that he has to make through as an African leader, as the way they have tied them down so well systematically that nothing belongs to you. I've put episodes and episodes on the internet, guys. You should see them, of people speaking about how they don't allow Africa to trade amongst itself. Africa has to trade more with outside and it's allowed to trade with itself. They cause so much confusion systematically. A black man is always known for breaking the rules and being a thug. Now he's battling the stereotype in his mind that I can prove that I'm a proper Negro and I'm not a criminal. I'm not a... You're trying to beat that stereotype. And that stereotype is being weaponized against you to not overthrow the systems that have completely weaponized the system against you. What? Just look at Robert Mugabe. They'll just do a documentary about you and say how you're a dictator because you won't agree with Donald Trump. Where do you go? Where do you turn? Okay, I'll take a lousy 5 million. Yeah. Anyway, this white man's telling me, it seems nice. Remember how many times we believe that? It's as trivial as that, brothers and sisters. He seems nice. Maybe down the line, a 10-year plan, he's right. Maybe these things take time. Maybe in 10 years, it will balance itself out. Maybe some of them just become hopeless and think, oh, I'm just short my own pockets because this is one thing I ain't fixing. Oh, I'm going to fix this? This is a mess. He's probably convinced nobody's going to convince this mess. When he's looked at the papers, when he looked at how well you've been colonized, nobody's going to fix this. I might as well take my 5 million and live my life. This is why I say I don't believe African leaders should be people who are educated with titles. By the way, these titles, when are they legitimized? He was talking about the Zimbabwean guy was talking about another college in Zimbabwe, or rather in the UK, that we're going to be taking students from Zimbabwe, something like this. I'm going to paraphrase it. And although Zimbabwe colonized, or rather England colonized Zimbabwe, and that college now has to learn, their students learn in English, you're still, when you come to the UK, being double checked if you were taught correctly in something in English, which is hypocrisy. The way he was saying, just explain how the hypocrisy of it, because you colonized us and made us learn the degree in English, and now even though we have the degree, we still have to double check if our English is good. It's like you're just, oh my God, people just mess in your head, putting this standard of life of, if it is not white, it is not right. And you expect with all this maze, someone's going to come into the room with these people and perform their best. There are so many aspects to colonization, my brothers and sisters, within the mind and systematically. that I know I'm talking to a brother who is uneducated and not thought about this deeply when he's just like, oh, well, we should just go in the office and just push a button and get all our minerals back. Simple, like, it's easy. We just sell Africa to the highest bidder. That's the one. We are leaders who just incompetent leaders who sell Africa to the highest bidder. Every other leader in the West has a little bit of self-dignity to say, listen, I may want to line my pockets, but I don't want to be smaller than Donald Trump in a room. Listen, I might want to line my pockets, but I'm not going to be smaller than Keir Starmer when I go into that meeting. Listen, I maybe want to line my pockets, but I'm certainly not going to be smaller than. And whenever someone's dollar is lower than he's thinking, okay, look, the dollar is worth more than the pound, or the pound is worth more. Or the euro is worth more. It's something that happens. But with African leaders, just absolutely none of that in them. Nothing in their DNA. You have to sit and think, my brothers and sisters. I'm going to end it here because I've said a lot today, and it's a lot I want to get through, and I won't be able to get through all in this episode. Like I said, I've done episodes where I've gone into it more extensively. But there's two aspects to colonization. You are defeated systematically. And on top of being defeated systematically, you are defeated psychologically. So there has to be a renewing of the mind that happens to Africans. A renewing of the mind. Because the job that's going to take to decolonize is going to take a man who has renewed his mind. You think sitting there that it needs a man who's well educated, who knows the numbers and figures. It will not take that. It will take a man who's willing to sit in jail for 27 years. It will take a man who's it will take a man who's understood so well this fight and has prepared himself not for the financial or the business who has prepared himself for the psychological war of freeing Africa from captivity. Because once you begin that process, I can guarantee you your opposition won't be the only people you'll be fighting. I think the main people you'll be fighting is the people who have not yet decolonized their mind, who will be programmed to fight you because they don't understand what it looks like when someone's trying to go about decolonizing Africa. So it's going to work against them when you're being harsh with Western leaders, when Western media is demonizing you, and all these things, they're going to reject you. Because they don't even know the first steps of decolonizing the mind. They don't even know they don't even get it. They don't get that you got to become the enemy. They don't get that you're breaking free from something that has left no fingerprints. But you got to move with this conviction despite the propaganda. And and all the Western media are able to demonize you very smoothly because they're very good. They don't leave any fingerprints. So now Negroes, I believe in Donald Trump saying, Donald Trump's a very nice man and loves African people. Because he just comes and does one press conference saying, I love African people. I don't know why that African, let's say his name is Shaka Zulu. I don't know why Shaka Zulu won't even have a meeting with me. He's a very incompetent man. Look at the state of Africa. Look at the state of that country. It's because you have that man who won't even have a meeting with me. You see, our African leaders, that's why they won't even have a meeting with Trump. Meanwhile, your man's trying to make sure you get the right price for your minerals, for your cobalt, for your coltan. Then he gets an army who are trained by the Americans to come and say, next time you see that guy roaming around in his whip, shoot him and get his head off because he's trying to mess with our money. I'll tell you one thing. Sometimes I think about it'd be nice to be an African leader. Other times I think, oh my goodness, I don't know. I don't know. Because it is not a job that I don't think I would be able to get done smoothly. Smoothly and without controversy. It is, when you really understand the job, it is not going to be a straightforward job. Psychologically and systematically. Anyway, brothers and sisters, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
And I'm on a mission for you.